All right, guys. Good morning to you. We're sitting here where it's mid-morning, November 9th. And I thought this would be a good day to take a look at the daily chart of Bitcoin. So, given the recent volatility that we've had, the fundamental news, and this price action over the last 24 hours, which has been rather extreme, I thought a good idea to visit the daily chart, and I had a member make that suggestion as well so we can get a little perspective on where we are. So I've got in front of us here, this is Bitcoin to the dollar. Again, I'm using Bitstamp, but now I've got the daily chart up. And this is worth taking a look at. So a few things to consider here. Now, I mean, fairly clear count, right? So, you can say, well, how are you just determining that's the third as opposed to this? Well, you can be pretty, simple about it and just look at, we can go to our wave oscillator, or our Elliott wave indicator. You can see here, this is the peak right here, so fairly reasonable assumption given this move here that this is some sort of a third wave. And if we reference back, going all the way back to zero to begin that first wave, this does play fairly well. So given that, if we operate under the assumption that we're putting in a third here, given how technical Bitcoin has been, not reaching these targets here, and I'm going to show you how I got that box in a second. This gives me pause here. This would surprise me if we'd come up short on some of these very strong fib targets up here. So I'm inclined to think that we're not finished yet. I've seen some good Elliotticians suggesting that we've got a top in here. I'm going to beg to differ, and I'll show you why. So let's just start cranking out some targets. So again, keeping it very simple. If I'm going to pull, I have to use zero here. I have to use zero as a baseline here because you just can't see it on the chart. So I'm pulling from approximately zero up to my one high, and then I'm projecting from my two. All right, so I get a big target way up here. This is 96.43. So let's mark that as well as a potential top up here. This is a biggie. This would be an extreme off of that wave one, which is taking the move from zero to call it 2,900. Right? That was our wave one, and I can probably dial this in a little tighter here to make sure we're right on it. Let's get it exact. And there's our there. Well, I guess we'll be right here. Yeah, that's our highest high by just a couple of ticks. So let's be precise about it. Okay, let me zoom out now. Okay, so we get our 261. That would be the extreme for a third wave. All right, but let's consider these others. Here's the 1618, 175. We're to and through, but we're in between. I suppose we could also look, if we visit this here. Let's look at the 200%. Let's consider all the alternatives here. So I'm going to just click on the 200. Take a look at that. Well, that's kind of interesting. We're 200% of the distance of 1. So, that's, again, precision is what I'm looking for. So given that we have this drawn up here as our 2618, knowing that we're to and through the most common target, let's draw again. Let's look at it in relation to this, what we see as our impulsive structure here, from this one to our very technical 2. Now we look. Okay, so here's the 618. So falling shy of that by just this small margin, this would surprise me. But again, Bitcoin is so technical; it's driven so much by algos. To leave that hanging there makes me suspicious of that high. Let's also check for just the traditional algo target. So if I'm working off of my 2 low here to my 1 high, we can see we went right to the 618, and there's my 100%. Negative, pardon me, that's the negative 100% off of that algo pull here. Here's the 23, the negative 618. So again, I get this little window here And it would just surprise me that we would fall short of hitting this nice confluence zone here, which is just above 8,000. So I'm leaning more towards a continuation here rather than calling this third in here. Remains to be seen, but it would surprise me if we don't take one more run up to try and get at least to that nice round number, which will tend to be a magnet of trying to get to 8,000. So, we have to consider the possibility that we may have topped. That certainly remains a possibility given we had a 700 plus 4-hour bar, here yesterday off of the fork news. So this is an extreme volatility, and you have kind of a fight between the people that kind of panic sold or sold quickly because they weren't going to get their free Bitcoin or I'll call it a dividend, right, with the 2x fork. Since they're not going to get that free Bitcoin, many just bailed on that. Others, jump on the opportunity to buy Bitcoin after a $700 sell-off. So you have sort of a back and forth tussle here that it's going to be harder to qualify on a daily chart, but I caution the assumption that the top is in here, even though we do have some market geometry here. Here's the outside edge of the pitchfork, of course. Leaving it hanging here would surprise me. So let's go down to the 4-hour, and let me get over to that and take a look at it. So here it is on the assumption that the fifth is in, which, again, we have to consider that. But also here, hanging, not making the outside edge here would surprise me. But that's a possibility. And if that is the case, so our first thing we'd look for is some subdivision, right? So we'd want to see something along these lines. So if we've got a 5 in of our third, well, of course, we're going to look for an ABC, right? And so if that's the top, this would be just the kind of entry that we look for, right? We'd have the market geometry. I've got the 300% on the outside edge here from our median line. There's 100, 200, 300 on the outside edge. Because if we're going to subdivide and get an ABC, we'd be looking for a buy here between the 38 and the 50. This lines up rather nicely. Potentially, you've got the Vegas wave moving up to meet you. So, that's just in keeping it simple and straightforward. Here's the sweetheart buy potentially right here, which is around that 66 and change level. It's going to vary from exchange to exchange. I don't hate it. I can tell you this: if we get there, I'm certainly going to be looking for a buy. But I'd be so the 30. Here's the 38 here, right? So we'd be double bottoming here if we're going to visit. And so here we are at the 200%. Are we going to double bottom here? That we don't get great subdivision here, so I think the more likely contender is to be looking to buy down here around this 67, 66 area. That's the sweet spot if we get a shot at that, and we don't know that we will. But that's certainly one where you'd want to be paying attention, right? How about I say it that way? If we get this kind of subdivision, right? And that is operating on the assumption that we have now put in the third. We've finished this internal impulsive structure to top on the third, right, before correcting into our fourth to go back up one more time for a fifth, and then there are targets. Well, so on the 4-hour, right? So on that same scale, if we're pulling from our 2 to potentially, if this ends up being our high, and we're a buyer here at the 50 in that 66 to 67 zone, well, our algo target -23 is 84.81. Right, so on the 4-hour we get even higher targets, and then here we are, up around 9,000, which is just fib pulls off of this, and I think I can show you that quickly. So if I take the wave 1, pull from my 2. This is up here. This is the 2618. This is more like what I was looking for as our extreme for this third, and we still may see that. We don't know that this top is in. This is, we're leaving this here because it fits what we have right now, but we still have the potential to be heading up here to challenge these levels up at 8,000 and above. So, I'm not committed to that as a fifth, but we have to consider it. And if that is the fifth and we get an ABC, well, then we know exactly how to play it because we've got a 3 in. We're looking for the high probability zones to be a buyer down here, and we'd look at the alternate price projection from the length of the A wave. If we get a B, looking for that C, and we'd look for that confluence down here to meet the market geometry, pattern, price, structure, all potentially there for us. Just a beautiful buy down here between 67, I'll call it, and 66. So one to be aware of. So what I encourage people to do that are, at least this is relatively new to them, just keep that off to the side and see if you can get that to fit with what you see here on a 4-hour chart. Now let's go down and see if we can get a little more clarity on this by going to some smaller time frames. So on the hourly, let's go look at this. Now, I've left the wave on this here. So here's potentially the 3 high that I feel is a good high, and we have the possibility, if you think back to the 4-hour, the one scenario is that the 5 is in here. Well, I'm not convinced that's the case until I see a break of some of these lows here, because we have the potential for an expanding diagonal to finish this fifth. Until we take out, well, really until you take out this swing low here at 69.17, at least on Kraken, where I've been trading this, at 69 and a quarter. Until we take that out, we still have the possibility for this to finish as an expanding diagonal. Right? It's not uncommon in a fifth. We have potentially the ABC putting in. We're right to the Vegas wave. See how we just come right tuck into it. We've got this potential. We'd be measuring in a diagonal like this. We'd be looking for the relationship between the start of the diagonal to the 3rd high projected from potentially the 4th, and then we get the 100% right here. That would be the likely target. Here's the negative 23 off of the algo pull, off of this low here. There's our negative 23. And then we've got the 1272. And then the median line, of course, also working as a magnet. So potentially we could move higher. There's the 1618 at 8,500. So until this low breaks, we can't be definitive about saying we've got a top in here. We can't make that call because this still potentially plays. And given what I've shown you relative to the daily and the 4-hour, this still seems a likely path until we break this low. Then we can be definitive about this 5 being in, and then we start looking for that excuse me, that ABC to play during a correction. Right now I got an ABC, it's a shallow C, but I've got support here. I've got my Vegas wave. I've got this trend line. We'll see as the day progresses if this is an area where you're seeing some accumulation, and then we start to move back higher. We're heading into the weekend. We've seen a lot of volatility in Bitcoin over the weekends. So, certainly a point of note, you can see I've got alarms on all of these. I want to know when those are breaking in case I'm, not staring at the chart. So I would encourage you to do the same. Right now, my bias continues to be higher, looking for 8,000 as a target, but, I'm prepared for the alternate should we see that. Let's go to the 15 real quick and see if we can get anything out of that to help us get a handle on it. So here's the expanding diagonal again. You can see it here on the 15-minute. Note how we went yesterday as we had that spike. We went right to the median line, and you can see that subdivision that works. So we have potentially this expanding diagonal, which would play again nicely. And now here on this, if I scrunch this up, I'm pulling the median lines from much lower, and look how consistent that's been. Let me have to scrunch this up a little more for you. But just pulling from back here in those swings, look how the median line continues to be a magnet. We go to and through, back to it. To the extreme, back to it. Outside of it, we hover around it, get through, back to it, out to the extreme, back to it, right? So I would encourage you to always have the pitchfork or the Andrews median line, however you want to call it, on your chart. You get 3 pivots, you put it on, and you leave it on until it's so far beyond it that it has no value or bearing on where the price action is. Leave it on, because if you'd taken this off to redraw it upon, from some of these other pivots, you'd have missed that. You wouldn't have realized what was happening there as we just wicked that, and then look at the reaction as we come away from it, then all the way back here as we sit at the 200%. So this, is interesting to me. I mean, I'm not opposed to, some small bites at this here. I would like to see some more impulsive behavior, because you see now if I blow this up, see these are little tells in the market. You see how we've got a little 1, 2, 3. We get a little ABC that's not impulsive looking. Now if we take out this swing high here, we could get a little diagonal, a little leading diagonal to start us off into a fifth of a fifth of a fifth. We could get that, but right now that looks more corrective. And, so the bias here needs to be proven. I would like to see something, at least a 5-wave structure, to get us off to say perhaps we've got a 1. In this case, it would be a leading diagonal to finish the ending diagonal. Right? Again, this is not uncommon in 5th waves, because you have this instability and a battle for the trend is really what's happening here. So, really, really technical trading, really interesting trading. Look for tells. 5 waves, of course, we want to defer to the longer term trend. So getting a 5-wave structure here would have me teeing up for the first 50 for potentially a small bite at a buy there, looking for this push up to 8,000. So some interesting trading. It's very tricky in here. This kind of a move is, I'm sure some people got punished there. I mean, that's just, hard to manage through that, right? So that's why I consistently harp on, controlling the risk. Where are your stops? Where are you out? Where are you proven wrong? Because, the market bites hard when it comes down. So let's see. There's 16 minutes. That probably covers everything that I can offer to you today relative to Bitcoin. I'd be watching here closely. Look for signs of an impulsive movement, at least a 5-wave structure, perhaps opportunity on the first retrace. All right, guys, I'll wrap it there.